Welcome back to Rugby Obsession, your deep dive into all things rugby. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future deep dives. Today, we're tackling a new law, one that's shaking things up for scrum halves and maybe even reshaping how teams are built.
Yeah, it's definitely stirred up a lot of conversation.
Yeah, it has. And it's gotten us thinking, is this evolution in action right there on the pitch? To really get into this, let's rewind to France versus Wales in the Six Nations. Remember that incredible try from Antoine Dupont?
Of course, Dupont, arguably one of the best in the world, perfectly exploited the new law.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting. So for our listeners who might not know, what exactly did this new law change?
Well, it's all about the scrum half's positioning. Now they have to stand further back from the scrum until the ball emerges. Seems like a small tweak, but it has huge implications. Dupont's try is a perfect example. That extra bit of space and time gave him more options to read the defense and launch an attack.
It's like the game just got a bit more three-dimensional for scrum halves.
Precisely. And that's why we're seeing such a range of reactions. Austin Healey, a former England star, called it a terrible law change. He feels like it takes away from the traditional art of being a scrum half.
I can see his point. But then you have someone like Richie Rees, a former Welsh scrum half, who sees the excitement in this new guessing game for defenses.
Reese's perspective is fascinating because it highlights the potential for creativity and unpredictability. Defenses can no longer rely on the scrum half being right up on the scrum, ready to dart out in a predictable way.
So we have these contrasting views. Some see it as diminishing the traditional skills of the scrum half, while others are excited about the new tactical possibilities it unlocks.
And to understand these concerns, it's helpful to think about the classic scrum half archetype. Speed, agility, lightning-fast decision-making in tight spaces, those were the hallmarks. The worry is that this new law might favor bigger, more powerful scrum halves, who can exploit the extra space to bulldoze through defenses.
And if that happens, where does that leave those little annoying scrum halves that commentator Nick Mullins talked about? Will we see a shift in the type of player who thrives in that position?
It's a valid question, and it gets even more interesting when you consider the potential ripple effects across other positions.
Right. The article we're deep diving into today even suggested that fly halves might start to resemble center hybrids, like Henry Slade or Owen Farrell. It's almost like we're blurring the lines between traditional positions.
Absolutely. And speaking of blurring lines, what about the number 8 in this new landscape? Might we see a greater emphasis on quick, agile players like Cameron Hanekom, as opposed to the more traditional powerhouses like Dwayne Vermeulen?
Okay, hold on a second. Before we get too far down this rabbit hole, we want to remind everyone to subscribe to Rugby Obsession. For more in-depth analysis and heated debates about the latest developments in the rugby world, we're your go-to source for everything rugby. Now back to these intriguing possibilities. Could this law change really have that much of an impact on how teams are constructed?
It certainly has the potential, but I think it's important to remember that rugby is ultimately a team sport, and the success of any one player, regardless of their position, depends on the collective efforts of the entire squad.
That's a great point. Rugby is about so much more than just individual skill. It's about understanding the flow of the game, adapting to your opponents, and working together to achieve a common goal.
Exactly. And while this new law might create opportunities for certain types of players to shine, it doesn't necessarily mean we'll see a complete overhaul of team structures or playing styles. The core principles of rugby will always remain the same.
I think that's a crucial takeaway for our listeners. As much as we love to speculate about these hypothetical shifts and potential evolutions, we have to remember that the heart of the game remains constant. It's about passion, strategy, teamwork, and that unpredictable element that keeps us all on the edge of our seats.
And let's not forget the mental aspect of the game. Rory Cocotte, the former French international, argues that scrum halves and fly halves need a particular instinct, a mentality that's developed over years of playing. You can't just plug someone into those positions and expect them to thrive.
It's like saying you can't just teach someone to think like a chess grandmaster overnight. There's a depth of experience and intuition that comes with years of playing in those key positions.
Absolutely. So while we might see some changes in terms of physical attributes and the types of players who are drawn to certain positions, those core mental aspects of the game will still be crucial.
That makes me think about how defenses might adapt to this new law. Will we see more teams employing strategies like those we've seen from South Africa with Faf de Klerk, where the scrum half shoots out from the scrum to put pressure on the attack?
It's certainly a possibility, and it's a fascinating tactical wrinkle to consider. If defenses start to anticipate the scrum half's delayed movement, They might try to use that to their advantage, creating a sort of cat and mouse game around the scrum.
It's like each law change creates a ripple effect,
Mhm.
forcing both sides to reassess their strategies and find new ways to exploit the situation.
Exactly. And that's what makes rugby such a dynamic and engaging sport to watch. It's constantly evolving. And this new law is just the latest example of that.
And if you're loving this deep dive into the ever-changing world of rugby, make sure you subscribe to Rugby Obsession. We'll keep you ahead of the curve with all the latest news, analysis, and debate, but we also want to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think about this scrum-half law change? Do you see it as a positive step for the game, or are you concerned about the potential impact on traditional skills and playing styles?
Head over to our social media pages and let us know your thoughts. Are you excited to see a new breed of scrum half emerge? Or do you think the traditional masters of the position will find a way to adapt and thrive in this new landscape?
We're eager to hear your perspectives and keep this conversation going. After all, it's your passion for rugby that keeps us energized and inspired. It's fascinating to think about how this one law change could have such a wide-ranging impact on the game.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected all the elements of rugby are. A seemingly small tweak in one area can lead to tactical shifts and adjustments across the entire field.
And as fans, that's what keeps us coming back for more. The constant evolution, the strategic battles, the moments of brilliance from players who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, think about someone like Dupont again. He's almost redefining what it means to be a scrum half.
He really is. He's got that incredible blend of speed, vision, and decision-making that allows him to exploit any opportunity that presents itself. And with this new law giving him even more space to operate, it's exciting to think about what he might do next.
He's setting a new standard, and that's always a good thing for the sport. It challenges other players to raise their game and find creative ways to adapt.
It's like he's showing everyone what the future of the scrum half position could look like. And who knows, maybe we'll see a whole generation of players inspired by his style, pushing the limits of what's considered possible.
And that's what makes this such an exciting time for rugby. We're seeing innovation and creativity on both sides of the ball as teams and players adjust to this new dynamic.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there, keep your eyes peeled for those scrum halves who are taking those extra steps. We're looking for that killer pass or that unexpected break. The game is evolving, and it's an incredible time to be a rugby fan.
Absolutely. And if you want to stay up to date on all these developments and join the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Rugby Obsession. We'll keep you informed and entertained with in-depth analysis and passionate discussion about everything rugby.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of scrum halves and this game-changing new law. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and came away with some food for thought. Thank you for listening to Rugby Obsession. We'll see you next time for another exciting episode.